Yeah. Today we're gonna talk about Ilchot Teshuva again, continuing Ilchot Teshuva. I mean, we kind of went all over. We started with I think it was the sixth chapter, or the fifth chapter, and then we jumped to the seventh, and now we're going back to the third. Because this chapter I thought was more appropriate right before Rosh Hashanah to study. We're not going to study the whole chapter. And then at the end of the class, we'll talk a little bit about the shofar. I have a little hidush, a little insight about the shofar, which I hope you'll find interesting. Okay, so let's start. So we were studying about freedom of choice, right? And as freedom of choice, we have governance over our actions. We're able to take responsibility for our actions, and we can choose whether to go down the right path or the wrong path. And then we learned that as an extension of our freedom of choice is that even if we started heading down the wrong path, we still have the freedom of choice to course correct, right? And to say, okay, I did this wrong. We're able to think of how are we behaving, what are our qualities, our personality, and maybe there's something to change there and correct. And we always have that option to do better and to always, and we said Teshuva isn't just something that if you did something wrong, you need to do Teshuva on that wrong deed or that misdeed. Teshuva is really something that we should be engaging all the time, always thinking, what can we perfect in ourselves? What can we improve in ourselves? And that improvement is Teshuva. Teshuva literally means returning to God. God is the Almighty, perfect being. We are by definition imperfect beings, and that strive for perfection is that coming closer to God, and that is what Teshuva is. Okay? And so now we'll see what is a righteous person or an evil person, and what's the hashlachot of that? What comes from that? So it says, Kol ehad ve'ehad mibnei ha'adam yesh lo zechuyot va'avonot. Every single person, every human being on earth, he has zechuyot, he has merits, and he has avonot, and he has sins or bad deeds. Everybody. There is not one person on earth that is all righteous and has zero bad deeds. And there is not one person on earth who is all evil and has no good deeds. There's no such thing. Everybody has both. Mi shezechuyotав yeterot al avonotav tzaddik. Right? So he who has more merits than his misdeeds is considered tzaddik. All right? He is righteous. Mi she'avonotav yeterot al zechuyotav rasha. And the opposite, right? He who has more sins or misdeeds, more than his merits, than his good actions, he is called rasha. Mehtzah, the mehtzah benoni. Right, someone who has them both equal, exactly half is Benoni. Benoni is medium. He is medium, parv. Right? He's not meat, not milk, parv. V'chen medina. This is up. This isn't just people. This is hamedina, a state, a city, or a nation. Im hayu zechuyot kol yoshevei hamerubot. על עוונותיהם, הרי זו צדקת. It says, if a state or a country or a nation, right? All its citizens have a lot more good deeds, a lot more merits than their misdeeds. They're a righteous nation. So this is a righteous nation. Right? And if it's the opposite, then this is an evil nation, a Rasha nation. V'chen kol ha'olam kulo. This is not just the individual and not just the nation or the state, but also the entire world, all of humanity. All of humanity is also judged as a collective to see, are they worthy? We had like a kiddush a l'chaim at work the other day, and the CEO of the company spoke a bit, and he actually put it in a very interesting term. He says, okay, so what are we doing on Rosh Hashanah? We're basically renewing our lease on the world. So on Rosh Hashanah, we're judged not just as individuals, and it's not just us, it's the entire world that is judged as individuals, as nations, and as humanity as a whole. The entire world too is checked to see, are they righteous or are they wicked? Adam she'avonotav merubin al zechuyotav miyad hu met berisho. All right, so says a person who is wicked, who has more avonot than his merits, says miyad hu met berisho. Right away, he dies in his wickedness. Well, what does that mean? Shneimar al rov avonecha, because it says in the Navi in Yirmiyahu, it says you should die on the account of all of your wickedness, of all of your sins. I'm sure there's plenty of people, I think, that we can assume were very wicked even before they actually died at the end, right? I mean, we can think, if we go to the most extreme case, are you telling me that Adolf Hitler, Yimach Shemo, he only had more misdeeds and sins on the day he died than his merits? So what does this mean? That right away he dies in his wickedness? Is it a bolt of, like, as soon as you had 50 good deeds and you had 50 bad deeds, and you know half Benoni, right? Now you rob 10 shekels from someone that kind of like puts you over. Does a bolt of lightning come down and strike you and kill you? So what is Maimonides saying here? Let's hold on to that question. Okay, keep it in the back of our minds. וכן מדינה שעוונותיה מרובין מיד היא עובדת. It's the same as for a city or state. As soon as its wickedness surpasses its righteousness, right away it becomes destroyed. Shneimar, as it says, Za'akat Sedom va'Amora ki rabba, says the cry coming out from Sedom and Gomorrah is so great. It's so great. It means it's the cry that it generates from its wickedness, right, overcomes any merits that there might be in Sedom. And so God came down and destroyed Sedom. V'chen kol ha'olam kullo. Right, and so too the entire world, all of humanity, im hayu avonotehen merubin miyad nishhatin. Right, if their wickedness overcomes their good deeds, right away they get destroyed. All of humanity. Shneimar, Adonai ki rabbah ra'at ha'adam. Right? It says that God saw, so behold, the wickedness of man is great. It's very, very great. Doesn't mean very great. It means there was more than their merits. ושיקול זה אינו לפי מניין הזכויות והעוונות. He says, and don't think it's not counted like one against one, right? He stole 10 shekels and he gave 30 shekels tzedakah. All right, so that's one bad deed and one good deed, right? Says, okay, he stole 10, but he donated 30, which is, are they equal? Maybe they're equal. But don't think it's counted one for one. But by the greatness, he says, maybe he stole 10 shekels from one person, but then the next day he saved another person's life. Okay, so I don't know, is it stealing 10 shekels, giving 30 shekels, maybe it's more or less equal, but he saved the person's life. Can you compare that to stealing 10 shekels from someone? Or he donated 1,000 shekels, or he donated an entire wing at the university or the hospital, but he also murdered someone. So how do we figure is what's greater and what's more terrible than what? He says it's not about the number of how many good deeds you did as opposed to how many bad deeds you did. It says yes, says you may have a merit for something that is equivalent to many bad deeds. All right, so you did something great, you saved someone's life. Maybe that can counter many bad deeds that you did. He says, maybe we'll find in him some good deed. Well, why are we looking for one good deed in this wicked person if we already know that if he has many, many bad deeds, he should be judged as a wicked person? Because maybe this one avon, this one good deed that he has is greater than many bad things that he did. It says, you find something good in him. ויש עוון שהוא כנגד כמה זכויות. So then the same goes the other way around. There's one bad deed that can be equivalent or counter many good deeds that a person did. שנאמר וחוטא אחד יאבד טובה הרבה. Says, in one sinner can annihilate a lot of a lot of goodness, a lot of greatness. So why he did one thing bad? Okay, so he donates to this cause and to this cause and to this cause. What people don't know is that he also eliminates his competition by making them disappear. So who knows? Who's the judge? It says, "Ve'en shokrin ela b'da'ato shenil deot." It says, only one being can judge. Only God, who knows all of man's actions and all of man's thoughts and all of man's, says deot is also means characteristics, personality traits. Only him in his mind is able to quantify the deeds against each other and come up with a verdict. Is this person a Sadiq or is this person a Rasha? And he knows how to calculate if a person is a Sadiq or a Rasha. It says, and you should also know this. Kol mi sheniham al hamizvot she'asa. Right? Someone does a good deed, and then he regrets it later on. V'tahar zechuyot, right? And he wonders about his merits. And he says to himself, Amar belibo, Uma ho'alti ba'asiyatan. What good did I do? What came out? What good came out of this mitzvot that I did? Maybe nothing good came of it. There was no point in doing this mitzvah. He says he lost his merit for those mitzvot. He says if you do a mitzvah, just be happy in the mitzvah that you do. Don't try to later think, what did I contribute by doing this mitzvah? The mitzvah you did has its own merit. And only God knows what you merited from the mitzvah. Right? If you donate money to a certain cause, don't regret because you don't know what this cause has done. Say, I wasted 1,000 shekels. I shouldn't have donated it. Says, no, God knows what merit came from that. What goodness you put out there in the world. Ve'en maskirin lo sham zichut ba'olam. Says, because if you kind of regret it, then you kind of lost the merit for it. God's not going to count it in your list of merits against your avonot. Right, there's a pasuk in Yechezkel. It says, "And the righteousness of the righteous person will not save him on the day he does evil." So what does that mean? It says, it's not that. I mean, that kind of contradicts everything we said up until now. It says a person does a lot of great deeds, and then all of a sudden he does one bad deed, and now Yechezkel is coming and telling us that his righteousness isn't
that like Moses?
Sorry?
Is that like Moses? Is that like Moses? He done a lot of good deeds and then he hit the rock.
Okay, well, Moses, that's a very good question. Moses wasn't afterwards considered to be a Rasha, though. That action prevented him from leading the nation into Eretz Israel. Why? We can get into a whole discussion. I can give you a brief answer. Is because that action made him unworthy of leadership in this new state of being in Eretz Israel, being in the land of Israel. It was time for new leadership. But that's a good point. So then what does it mean? Tzidkat tzaddik, right? The righteousness of the tzaddik will not save him b'yom rishon, on the day that he does an evil deed. That kind of goes against everything we said up until now. You understand? Because everybody, they do good deeds and they do bad deeds. But if you're saying that none of my good deeds are going to be remembered or counted for when I do something bad, then what does it help that I had a lot of good deeds to counter them? It says, Lo tatzin, it's not going to save him on the day he does bad. It says, En ze ela betohe ala rishonot. Says this is only regarding a person who does evil, right? But he says, what good did I do with all the mitzvot I did, right? All the mitzvot I did, what do they count for? So I kept kashrut for many years. I did this for many years. That's it. I'm leaving Judaism. I'm leaving, how do you call it, the path of the righteous. And now I'm going to start stealing, and I'm going to start doing this, and I'm going to start doing all these bad deeds. He says that's what it's talking about. Not, it's the way of man. The way of man is, we have our animalistic inclinations, and sometimes we're able to overcome it. Hopefully, most of the time we're able to overcome it, and sometimes we're not. But we don't regret the good things that we did, or we don't regret being good beforehand or ever. We just happen to trip up on something, right? So that's what it's talking about. Someone who regrets his good deeds, right? Even though he was a righteous person, now he has shifted and decided that none of that was worth anything, and he is going down the wrong path and doing evil deeds. That's what the pasuk talks about, that his righteousness will not save him on the day that he does evil. It's the day he decides that he's going to be doing evil and regrets any good deed that he did previously. Okay? Any questions so far? כשם ששוקלין עוונות אדם וזכויותיו בשעת מיתתו, כך בכל שנה ושנה שוקלין עוונות כל אחד ואחד מבאי העולם עם זכויותיו ביום טוב של ראש השנה. He says the same way that a person is judged, and basically he does good, he does bad, he does more good, he does maybe some more bad, and God now weighs his merits and his misdeeds, right? But when does this take place? It says bishat mitato, when a person dies, which is kind of the opposite of what we saw earlier. We saw earlier, it says, as soon as a person's misdeeds are greater than his merits, it says miyad umet berisho, right away he dies in his wickedness. But over here it says, when does God measure the merits against the misdeeds? It says bishat mitato. This is when a person dies. So who can suggest, who can reconcile these two statements here? אדם שעוונותיו מרובין על זכויותיו, מיד הוא מת ברשעו. Right away he dies in his wickedness. And over here it says, the same way that a person's is measured on the day he dies, or the moment he dies. I mean, there's the rest here says so too. Every year, every person is judged on the Rosh Hashanah. But how do you reconcile these two statements? Does everybody see the problem in these two statements?
Can you translate it again?
Sorry?
Can you say again the word
Okay, so I'll repeat. The first statement says,
in English?
the first statement says that when a person's misdeeds overcome his good deeds, miyad, right away he dies in his wickedness. And the second statement says same as, never mind the second part, but same as when that a person is judged when he dies, right? The same way that a person's merits are how do you call it, are weighed against his misdeeds when a person dies, so too on Rosh Hashanah. Does anybody see how these two statements conflict with each other? The first one says, as soon as your bad deeds overcome your good deeds, you die. That's it. The second one says, no, it's not actually when you die. It's just that when you die, that's when God measures your good deeds against your bad deeds.
Does it more so mean that your soul will not be immortal.
Okay, nice. Is that Naomi?
Yeah. Hi. Sorry, my phone is overheating from the camera, so.
Okay. Does anybody else agree, challenge what Naomi suggests? So Naomi, I'm gonna go with you on that a bit more. Expand on that. What does that mean?
I'm not
How
entirely
would you
sure.
explain the first statement based on what you said?
Just from like gleaming, or I guess just from like listening to talks, it's been really confusing, but it seems like a lot of Jewish literature, whatever that I've heard like in class, like I've never heard it elaborated upon, seems to suggest that yeah, basically you die and in a way you continue, but then there'll be a final death.
Okay, so what you're saying is, according to the first statement, it says when a person misdeeds overcome his good deeds, it says right away he dies in his wickedness. So
So
how does that fit with what you said?
well, his soul dies because it seems like there's two deaths, like because
Okay,
there's the world,
so,
there's
so
the
you're saying
world
the
to
first
come.
statement is talking about his soul
Yeah,
and not his physical body. Doesn't actually, his heart doesn't stop beating. It continues beating, but he's like an empty vessel.
yes, but he can't go to the next world because there's nothing left.
Okay. And the second statement, that's talking about when a person passes away. Okay, it makes sense. I have to say it makes sense. It fits. Anyone else wanna try to reconcile the two statements? Okay, so for now we're gonna go on with Naomi's suggestion. It's a very good suggestion, and it makes sense. So he says the same way that a person, when he passes away, this is talking about his heart stops beating, and people, go to his funeral and say Kaddish on him. So when that happens, when he dies, God evaluates this person's life to see if he has more merits than misdeeds. So the same way that happens on a person's death, כך בכל שנה ושנה, it's the same too, and every year, שוקלין עוונות כל אחד ואחד מבאי העולם עם זכויותיו. So same too, every single year, God evaluates every person, every human being, his deeds, right? His merits against his misdeeds. And this takes place b'Yom Tov shel Rosh Hashanah. It says on the day of Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah, which is starts Friday night. And right this week, Friday night. Right, we start Rosh Hashanah, Friday night and Sunday. מי שנמצא צדיק נחתם לחיים. He who is valued as a tzaddik, as a righteous person, meaning he has many merits, more merits than his misdeeds, he is signed off in the book of life. נחתם לחיים. מי שנמצא רשע נחתם למיתה. Right, and he who is found to be wicked, meaning he doesn't have enough merits to overcome his misdeeds, he is signed off in the book of death. Benoni, how about someone who is equal? Right? He has just as many on each side of the scale. Benoni tolin lo ad yom kippurim. And the person who is in the middle, the medium person, God says, I'm going to give him an extra 10 days to see whether he is righteous or not. He has his name on another book, the book of the Beinonim, and we are now going to count his merits against his misdeeds until Yom Kippur. Im asa teshuva nichtam l'chaim. Right? If he repented and did teshuva on any of those avonot that he had, he'll be written down in the book of life. Ve'im lav nichtam lemita. And if not, he will be written down for death. Okay. Everything understood here? Okay, so let's continue for now. You know what? I'm going to skip this halakha. You know, let's read it, and we'll come back to it again later. Now he's talking about Rosh Hashanah. It says, "Af al pi shetikiyat shofar berosh Hashanah gezerat hakatuv remez yesh bo." Says, even though blowing the shofar is the gezerat hakatuv, meaning it's decreed in the written law, it says remez yesh bo. There is a hint to it. Meaning we don't just do it because God said blow the shofar. There's aremes, it's hinted to. What's the reasoning behind it? It says, Kilomar, Uru Yeshenim Mishenatchem. Right? It says, wake up. It says in the Nevim, it says, wake up from your slumber. Anyone who is sleeping, wake up. So the blow of the shofar should wake you up. V'hakisu nirdanim mitardematchem. And wake up from your state of coma, of deep sleep. V'hapsu b'ma'asechem v'chizru b'tshuva v'zichru bora'achem. He says, wake up from your slumber, do soul searching, take account of yourself, and do teshuvah on anything that you need to do teshuvah for. So who's it talking about? It says, Elu ha-shochachim et ha'emet b'havlei ha-zaman. It's referring to the people who, most of us, we go through our lives. We wake up in the morning, we go to work, and we don't have God on the top of our mind all the time. And we forget about this truth. And the truth is, as Jewish people, we have many reminders. We have the mezuzah. So every time we pass through the doorway, we're reminded, right, that there is one God, right? We have many reminders. We have berachot that we say. All this is to give us reminders throughout our daily routine to not just, be swallowed up by our daily routine and forget that there is one single God above us. It says, "V'shogim kol shenatam behevel varik." Right? So otherwise, people, they may forget God. They may forget, not be aware of the presence of God all the time. And they'll waste their time on many things that have no use, right? Playing video games all day long. Watching, maybe watching sports all day long. Not saying that any of these things are bad. You have to be careful not to forget that there's a purpose to your life, that God put you here for a reason. He says, so wake up from this slumber, right? Look around you. There's more to the world than just work and your meals and sleeping and TV and anything else that you do. Right? And do better. And every person should soul seek and repent and do teshuvah on anything that either any bad thought that he has or any bad action that he has or any characteristic that needs to be improved. It says, don't just drift through life. The shofar is coming to wake you up to the presence of God and to remind you that this life isn't just for you to drift through it, but there's a purpose to your life, and wake you up to coming closer to God. That's what you should be striving to do. It says, לפיכך, therefore, צריך כל אדם שיראה עצמו כל השנה כולה כאילו חציו זכאי וחציו חייב. Every person throughout the entire year, not just this week before Rosh Hashanah, or during the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, or during the month of Elul. He says, all year long, a person should be aware of God's presence, and he should see himself throughout the entire year כאילו חציו זכאי וחציו חייב, as if he not a rasha, should never see himself as a rasha, where he has too many misdeeds, but a person should also not think of himself as an entirely righteous person. He should view himself as a Benoni, that maybe I will be judged as a righteous person, or maybe I'll be judged as an evil person. וכן כל העולם, and so too all of humanity, all of the world. He should view himself in this world as if the entire world could lean in any direction. Maybe all of humanity this year will, its evil deeds will surpass its good deeds, or maybe the opposite. But one good deed that I do can tilt the scale, not just for me, but for the collective that I am part of. חטא אחד הרי הכריע עצמו והכריע את כל העולם כולו לכף חובה וגרם להם השחתה. Meaning, right now I see myself and the entire world as, even scales. If I do one bad deed now, I'm destroying the world. Not just destroying myself, but I'm ruining it for everybody else as well. Asa mitzvah hat, and if I do one good deed now, maybe I'm saving the entire world from destruction. Right? He now tilted the scales in his own favor and also in favor of the entire world of all of humanity. Nekaf zechut. V'garam lahem teshuva v'atzal. And he brought salvation to the entire world. Zeu shene'emar v'saddik yesod olam. Right? Saddiq, a righteous person, is the foundation of the world. Why? Because the righteous person, in that one good deed that he did, he saved the entire world, because as far as we know, the entire world was perfectly balanced. And that one good deed that he did now just tipped the scales and brought salvation to the entire world. That's the good deed that he did now, right? But in 10 minutes from now, he's still viewing the world as if it's perfectly even. And the good deed that I'm doing now is tipping the scales in favor of the world. So it's this kind of consciousness that the Rambam is trying to instill. I mean, it's not just him, right? He brings this from the Talmud, that the Chachamim are trying to put in our minds. He says, don't see yourself and the world as evil, but be aware that they may not be 100% righteous either. And anything that you do can affect not just yourself, but the entire world and all of humanity. And you should be in this state of consciousness at all times, which is very, very difficult. And that's why on the Rosh Hashanah, right, we have this mitzvah of Tekiyat Shofar. The Shofar is coming to wake us up from our slumber being absorbed by our routine. and to take account of ourselves and realize that anything that we do will affect our own lives and the collective that we are in, whether it be our state, our country, our nation, and all of humanity. So Tzaddik, Yesod Olam, is who is the Tzaddik? Well, it doesn't have to be an angelic figure or a great rabbi. The Tzaddik is you. Because for all you know, you're perfectly balanced now. And this one good deed that you're doing now is saving the entire world. And you are the foundation of the entire world. זה שצידק עצמו הכריע את כל העולם כולו והצינו. Says, and the person who now basically justified the existence of himself and the entire world. And he says, and because of this, we have a minhag. נהגו כל בית ישראל להרבות בצדקה ומעשים טובים ולעסוק במצוות מראש השנה עד יום הכיפורים יותר מכל ימות השנה. And because of this, right, we have a minhag as the Jewish people that during these 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right, because we say during this time, anyone who's Benoni, they're put on the side. And now we're trying to make sure we're especially focused on these 10 days on the entire world being balanced. And any deed that we do, and so we do a lot of good deeds, and we give a lot of tzedakah, we give a lot of charity in order to justify everybody in the world. ונהגו כולם לקום בלילה בעשרת ימים אלו להתפלל בבתי כנסיות, right? And this is why we have the minhag of selihot, to wake up early and like wake up early, go to shul, do the selihot, do tahanun, right? And repent on our sin, v'divrei kibushin ad sheyeor hayom, until the sun rises. This is where we're going to stop for today in this chapter. All right. If there's any questions up until now, please raise. And then I also want to share another take on the shofar and why we blow the shofar. What is the meaning of the shofar? And what should we be focusing on when we hear the shofar on the Rosh Hashanah? Anything? Anybody? No. Okay, so I'll continue.
If I understood you correctly, and if I understood the blowing of the shofar correctly, somewhat, is it that to wake us up to analyze our way, the way that what we're doing, what we're doing, and the way that we're walking, if you understand what I mean. But to also not see the world as it's in equilibrium. It's not altogether bad, it's not altogether good. It's kind of
Right.
like an equal
We
level.
don't believe that man is evil, right?
No, exactly.
And so that's a very unhealthy way to look at it.
Mm.
But man has evil and man has good.
Yeah.
Right? And
The shofar, you wake yourself
really
up to
easy
analyze
get
yourself.
lost in our routine.
Yeah.
And so it's what does it mean to wake us up? It means to open your eyes for a minute and break out of this routine. And so wait a minute. I mean, everything I do affects not just myself, but the entire world as well.
Okay, yeah.
So we say in our prayers, we say, Hayom Harat Olam. We say this on Rosh Hashanah. Today the world was conceived. All right, so let's go back to Genesis and the creation of the world. So we'll go back for a second to the year 1965. In the US, there are two scientists, engineers of Bell. I'm going to go a little bit into cosmology now, a bit about the creation, a little bit into physics, right? Two scientists, engineers at Bell, they accidentally discovered something called the cosmic background radiation. We call it CBR in short.
Mm-hmm.
What was that? Is at the moment of the Big Bang, there was this huge explosion of energy and light, and it was released, and this, in fact, was the universe. Now, this huge energy and light never actually disappeared. It just stretched out over the entire universe. And that's what we call the cosmic background radiation. So what happened is that these two scientists, they accidentally discovered this cosmic background radiation. It was predicted to exist, or it was more hypothesized to exist based on the theory of the Big Bang. However, until this cosmic background radiation was discovered, there was no actual proof of the Big Bang, and it just stayed in the realm of theory.
Yeah.
So these two engineers, they weren't even looking for it. They were engineers of Bell, a phone company in the United States, and they had this big telescope, it was a special telescope, to hear what's it called, disturbances. And every direction they pointed the telescope, they heard the same interference, and they couldn't figure out where it was coming from. They thought maybe it was dirty, so they took it apart, they cleaned it, put it back together. Nothing changed. Any direction they looked or listened, they heard this disturbance. Until other scientists realized that what they were hearing was actually the cosmic background radiation. But this wasn't the only Big Bang. In fact, every stage in the development of the world happened with a Big Bang of its own. This first initial Big Bang was the Big Bang of the material, the inanimate world. Later on, there came a Big Bang of the biological world. All of a sudden, all over the world, right? It started in the waters with the fish. Fish appeared almost simultaneously all over the entire planet. And then with land animals, land creatures. That was the next stage in the Big Bang. Also of the biological world, of the botanical world. All of a sudden, the entire world was covered by vegetation. All right, just as the Torah says, and also as scientists say, there's no disagreement here. The next stage of the Big Bang, right? So we start with the material world, we move on to the botanical world, and then we move on to the animal world, and then there's the Big Bang of what they call civilization. All of a sudden, all around the world, humanity started to organize itself in cities and communities, and this, according to the scientists, took place about 10,000 years ago, and that was the next stage. However, there was still one more level, one more Big Bang after that, and the date of that Big Bang was on the 6th of Sivan, year 2448. This is the Big Bang of revelation, where man communicates with God. Up until now, there was some communication, but for the first time, there was this Big Bang of revelation where all of a sudden, millions of people are receiving revelation from God. This took place somewhere in the Arabian desert, right? Vav Sivan 24:48, at the footsteps of Har Chorev, or Mount Sinai. Now there was this verse that always troubled me in one of the songs that the Ashkenazim sing on Rosh Hashanah. Right? They say, Untane Tokef Kiddushat Hayom. They have this one sentence there. It says, Shofar Gadol Yishama Itaka. Right? And a great shofar, and a big shofar will be blown. V'kol demama daka Yishama. Says, and the sound of this minute silence will be heard. And I was always thinking, it was either shofar gadol itaka, and you hear a big loud sound, or kol demama daka. At least in modern Hebrew, demama means silence. So how are you going to hear this silence? So what is this demama? In Sefer HaYetzirah, it describes the letters. It says, Shin shoreket, Mem domemet. It says Shin shoreket. It says the whistling of the Shin is describing the sound that the Shin makes. It says, shh, sounds like a whistling. It says Mem domemet. So domemet doesn't mean silence. Demama doesn't mean silence. In modern Hebrew, we say, when we want to say silence, we say demama. But demama is the sound that the mem makes, like that, right? So what does that mean? So kol demama daka yishama. Says when God revealed Himself to us, right? He revealed Himself in the sound of a shofar, right? Where it says, "V'kol hashofar olech v'chazek meod," and the sound of the shofar is becoming greater and greater and greater. Moshe Daber says, Moshe speaks, v'ha'elohim ya'anenu bekol, and God responds to him bekol, with a sound, usually understood as voice. Says bekol, responds to him with a sound. What is this sound? Well, said in the beginning of the pasuk, bekol hashofar holech v'chazek meod. It's the sound of the shofar, the sound that the people hear at Har Sinai in the Revelation is the sound of this tremendous shofar. But then it says also, it says, Kol Gadol, it says a great sound, Velo Yasaf. And the sound never ended. So same way as this huge energy that was released in the Big Bang and was stretched over the entire universe. And in fact, we can still hear it today. When you have your radio on, and it's in between channels, and you hear that disturbance, a little fraction of that disturbance is because of the cosmic background radiation. He says, other than the cosmic background radiation, there's this other background sound from the revelation of God. It says, Kol Gadol Velo Yasaf, this huge sound that came out at this big bang of revelation on Vav Sivan, and it was stretched out. And where is it? It says Adonai Elohim Imo. It says God, right? His Lord God is with him, talking about the nation of Israel. Utruat Melech Bo. And the horn of the king is Bo, is in him. It's in the people. Right? When Eliyahu Navi returned to Har Chorev, the place where, to Mount Sinai, the place where this great revelation took place, he says, Lo ba'esh. He says, God doesn't reveal Himself in the fire. He says, Lo barash, not in a great noise. He says, Va'ishma, And the other says, and I heard kol demama daka, the subtle sound of a demama, this humming sound. That's all that was left. So how do we wake up? He says, Utruat melech bo, the sound of this kol from Har Sinai is in every single one of us. The problem is, it's very, very subtle. But we have a tool to amplify it. The shofar, all it does, it has no sound of itself. The shofar, the way you blow it, is really, you're making that sound, that humming sound of the mem. You blow that and it amplifies it. It says this sound is in every single one of us. It says, and we're going around our routine every day, so we can't feel it. There's many other sounds that are disturbing. Maybe there's also internal sounds. A voice saying, you're not good enough. A voice saying, see those 10 shekels over there? Take it. He's not going to see it. Do a bad deed, it's fine. It says we have the voice of God in us, but it's very, very subtle. And once a year, we blow the shofar to amplify that voice, that sound, so that it can overcome any other disturbances that we hear throughout the year, throughout our day-to-day routine, throughout our lives. So there's one thing that we should be focusing on when we hear the sound of the shofar. Some people, they say, you should be thinking of your sins. I say, no, do not be thinking of your sins. That's not the time. Some people say, should be having all of these kavanot, all of these thoughts of the oneness of God, maybe. It says, no, there's one thing that you should be focusing on during the blowing of the shofar. So what we say in the beracha, we say, lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the voice of the shofar. Because that voice of the shofar, that sound of the shofar, is the voice of God that He put into us in Har Sinai. And now He's giving us a chance to shut out any other disturbance, any other voice that may be trying to confuse us. And let this voice guide us in our decisions throughout the year to come. And that's the one thing that we should be focusing on. Yishmoa kol shofar, block everything else out, and let this voice of God that we hear through the shofar guide us in all our decisions throughout the year to come. So, Shana Tova. Any questions? I'm always available.